Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku awakened a second body. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air and ground gamma tasted of ozone and pulverized concrete. It was a familiar flavor to the students of Class 1A, a grim seasoning for the relentless curriculum designed by Principal Nizu. The training ground, usually a sprawling network of industrial pipes and towers, had been reconfigured into a labyrinth of urban decay. Skeletal high-rises clawed at the artificial sky, their windows like vacant eye sockets. Twisted rebar snaked from shattered pillars, and the ground was a treacherous mosaic of rubble and dust. This was no simple combat drill. This was an endurance test, a war of attrition. For 3 hours they had been battling a seemingly endless wave of advanced robots, each one tougher, faster, and smarter than the last. These weren't the cannon fodder from the entrance exam. They were military-grade machines, their chrome plating resistant to all but the most focused attacks, their AI capable of coordinated flanking maneuvers. Izuku Midoriya, his green and black costume scuffed and coated in a fine gray powder, felt the familiar thrum of one for all coursing through him. It was a constant companion now, a low-level hum of power that vibrated just beneath his skin, a caged star in his marrow. He had grown accustomed to its presence, learning to live with the sensation of being a vessel for something immeasurably vast. He moved in a blur of green lightning, a 30% full cowling his comfortable baseline. His movements were precise, economical. A flick of a finger sent an Air Force projectile to disable a robot's leg actuator. A swift kick, reinforced with the crackling energy, caved in the torso of another that tried to ambush Kaminari. He was a whirlwind of controlled force, his mind a frantic supercomputer calculating trajectories, threat levels, and the ever-present risk of self-destruction. Target analysis: quad leg unit, heavy armor on the chassis, exposed hydraulic lines at the joints. Kirishima is engaging head-on. Good. That draws its primary fire. I can circle around from the west, use the collapsed overpass as cover. His muttering was a low, breathless counterpoint to the cacophony of battle. Explosions bloomed in the distance as Bakugo carved a path of incandescent rage through a cluster of bots. A massive wall of ice erupted from the ground, courtesy of Todoroki, encasing a dozen machines in a glittering tomb. They were all pushing their limits, their faces etched with exhaustion and fierce determination. The threat of the Paranormal Liberation Front was no longer a distant shadow. It was a storm on the horizon, and Yui was determined to forge them into lightning rods capable of weathering it. Midoriya, on your 6! Ida's voice, crisp and authoritative even when strained, cut through his concentration. Izuku didn't hesitate. He pivoted on his heel, the world shifting in a green-tinted smear. A sleek, panther-like robot was leaping at him, claws of super-hardened steel extended. He dropped low, the metal talons whistling inches above his head, and channeled a burst of power into his legs. A 35% Manchester smash, aimed not at the armored body but at the ground beneath it. The concrete shattered, creating a crater that sent the machine tumbling end over end. Before it could recover, a length of tape shot out and wrapped around its head, followed by a jolt of acid from Mina that melted its primary optic sensor. A team effort. That's how they survived. He landed, taking a moment to catch his breath, his lungs burning. The constant output was taking its toll. It wasn't the sharp, bone-breaking agony of his early days, but a deep, pervasive ache, a protest from muscles and ligaments strained to their absolute breaking point. You okay, Deku? He looked up to see Ochako Uraraka floating down, her cheeks flushed. She deactivated her quirk, her boots touching the ground with a soft crunch. You look like you're about to run out of gas. He gave her a weary but genuine smile. I'm all right, Uraraka. Just a lot of them. Tell me about it, she said, wiping a smudge of grease from her cheek. It feels like Nizu emptied out a whole country's defense budget on this drill. Her gaze drifted past him, widening in alarm. Look out! Izuku's head snapped around. A hulking, tank-like robot, one they had crippled earlier, had reactivated its secondary systems. Its main cannon was destroyed, but a multi-barreled rocket pod on its shoulder was swiveling towards a nearby building, a precarious, 5-story shell of a structure whose support columns were already groaning. Several students, including Jiro and a winded Ojiro, were fighting near its base. Before either of them could react, the robot fired a salvo. It wasn't aimed at the students, but at the building itself. A series of deafening explosions tore through the lower floors. The structure shuddered, a deep groan echoing through its concrete skeleton. Then, with a scream of tortured metal, it began to fall. Not forwards, not backwards, but sideways. Right towards Uraraka. Time seemed to warp, stretching and thinning like taffy. Izuku saw it all with horrifying clarity. Uraraka, her eyes wide with shock, instinctively slapping her own pads to make herself weightless, trying to float away. But the collapse was too wide, a tidal wave of concrete and steel. She wouldn't be fast enough. A massive slab of the building's facade, a piece the size of a bus, was peeling away, preparing to slam down right where she was. Too far. Ida's not close enough. Todoroki's on the other side of the field. Bakugo is too high up. The calculations were instantaneous, merciless. It had to be him. There was no time for a plan, no time for a precise Air Force blast. He needed speed, and he needed overwhelming power to knock that slab off course. He needed more than his body was ready for. Don't do it, kid! You're not ready for that kind of output sustained. All Might's voice was a ghost in his memory, a constant warning. But he saw Uraraka's face, pale with terror, and the warnings turned to static. Sorry, All Might. He dug his feet into the broken ground, bending his knees, and let the floodgates open. The comfortable 30% hum of One for All roared into a cataclysmic inferno. Green lightning, once a controlled network of lines across his body, exploded into a chaotic, feverish corona. 35%. The ache in his bones deepened into a grinding protest. 40%. His muscles screamed, feeling like they were being torn from their anchors. 45%. It was a threshold he had only ever touched for a fraction of a second, for a single, desperate kick. Now, he was trying to channel it through his entire body, to use it to propel himself forward. It felt like trying to contain a supernova in a glass jar. A white-hot agony flared behind his eyes. The scars on his arms burned with phantom pain. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of green and black. He felt his feet leave the ground. The force of his launch was so violent it created a shockwave, blasting rubble away from him in a perfect circle. He was a missile, a bolt of pure, untamed energy. The slab of concrete was falling, casting a vast shadow. Uraraka was directly beneath it, her hands pressed to her helmet in a gesture of futile self-preservation. He reached her position in less than a heartbeat, positioning himself between her and the descending mass of death. He wouldn't have time to punch it. He had to take the impact, to redirect it. A suicidal, insane notion. As he prepared to channel the power into his back and shoulders, something inside him snapped. It wasn't a bone. It was something deeper, something fundamental. One for all, a quirk stockpiled for generations, a power that had grown too vast for any single, normal body to contain, seemed to hit a breaking point within his own strained vessel. It was like pouring an ocean into a cup. The cup had held, it had stretched, it had cracked, but now the ocean was demanding more space. The 45% output didn't just surge through his limbs. It overflowed. A scream, not from his mouth, but from the energy itself, tore through the air. A sound that was both a high-frequency shriek and a bass-heavy concussion that rattled the teeth of everyone on the field. The green lightning around Izuku intensified, turning a blinding, brilliant white. It didn't just crackle, it congealed. For a split second, there appeared to be a second silhouette inside the blaze of light, a mirror image of Izuku standing back to back with him. Then, the energy exploded outwards. Not in a directed blast, but in a non-directional, spherical wave of pure kinetic force. It wasn't destructive like one of Bakugo's explosions. It was a physical push, a colossal. Get back! The falling slab of concrete, caught in this wave, was violently shoved sideways. It crashed to the ground a dozen meters away from Uraraka, shaking the entire training ground. The panther-like robots, the tank, everything within a 50-meter radius was thrown back as if by a giant, unseen hand. When the blinding light faded and the dust began to settle, the silence was more shocking than the explosion. Uraraka, safe on the ground, stared with wide, unblinking eyes. Ida, who had been sprinting towards the scene, skidded to a halt, his jaw agape. Bakugo, hovering in the air with his explosions, simply floated, his usual snarl replaced by a look of profound, furious confusion. The scene before them was impossible. Lying on the ground, curled in the fetal position and smoking with the faint, dissipating afterimage of green energy, was Izuku Midoriya. His costume was torn, his body trembling with violent shudders, his face pale and clammy. He looked utterly spent, as if his very life force had been drained, and standing over him, his posture straight and calm, was Izuku Midoriya. This second Izuku was identical in every way, same face, same messy green hair, same freckles, same costume. But there were differences. His costume was pristine, untouched by the hours of battle. There were no scuffs, no grime. His body wasn't trembling, it was perfectly still, radiating an aura of calm, immense power. A quiet, steady network of brilliant green lightning, the very picture of 45% full cowling, crackled around him, humming with a clean, stable energy. He looked down at his own hands, flexing them slowly, a dazed, curious expression on his face. For a moment, the entire class was frozen, caught in a tableau of disbelief. Then chaos erupted. DKU! Uraraka screamed, scrambling to her feet. What the hell is that? Bakugo roared, his voice cracking with sheer bewilderment. The figure standing over the fallen Izuku didn't react to their shouts. He just continued to stare at his hands, as if he'd never seen them before. But one person reacted with practiced, instinctual speed. Shota Aizawa's eyes flashed a venomous red. His hair and capture weapon levitated, his entire focus lasering in on the impossible scene. Everyone, stay back, he commanded, his voice a whip crack that cut through the noise. His erasure hit both figures simultaneously. The brilliant green lightning around the standing Izuku fizzled out instantly, vanishing without a trace. The faint sparks still clinging to the fallen Izuku also died. Aizawa's gaze was hard, analytical. He was expecting the duplicate to dissolve, to reveal itself as some kind of clone made of light or energy, a trick of a rampaging quirk. It didn't. The second Izuku remained. Solid. Real. He swayed on his feet, his eyes glazing over, and then his body went limp, toppling sideways like a mannequin. He hit the ground with a soft, fleshy thud. At the same instant, the original Izuku, the one who had been trembling on the ground, gave a final, shuddering gasp and his eyes rolled back into his head. He fainted, his body finally succumbing to the absolute exhaustion. Now there were two identical, unconscious bodies of Izuku Midoriya lying amidst the rubble. Aizawa's mind raced, discarding and forming theories at a dizzying pace. Not an energy projection. Not a transformation. Duplication? But quirks are recorded. Midoriya's is registered as superpower. This is unprecedented. Cementos! Aizawa barked into his comms. Lockdown ground gamma. Full quarantine. No one in or out. Get me recovery girl on a secure line. Now, walls of gray concrete erupted from the earth, sealing off the area and blocking the view of the stunned and confused students. Aizawa stood alone in the newly formed arena, staring at the two boys who shared the same face. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant, mournful groan of settling steel. This was no longer a training exercise. This was a crisis of a kind he had never encountered before. The private wing of UA's infirmary was a place of sterile silence, a stark contrast to the usual hustle of bumps, bruises, and recovery girls scolding. This section was reserved for sensitive cases, for incidents that required discretion above all else. Right now, it was the epicenter of a burgeoning enigma. 2 beds side by side. In each lay Izuku Midoriya. Aizawa stood with his arms crossed, his expression a mask of grim neutrality that betrayed the storm of questions in his mind. Beside him, Toshinori Yagi, in his skeletal all-might form, was a portrait of raw anxiety. He paced back and forth, his thin frame casting a long, jittering shadow. His breath hitched with every glance at the two boys. I don't understand, Toshinori whispered, his voice raspy. He ran a hand through his gaunt hair. How? How could one for all do this? It's a quirk for stockpiling and transferring power. It doesn't create. Recovery girl, the only calm one in the room, adjusted her glasses and studied the two identical readouts on her monitors. "Biologically, they are perfect duplicates," she said, her tone clinical. "Same DNA, same blood type, same mass, down to the microgram. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'd say they were identical twins who'd lived identical lives." She gestured with a syringe to the boy in the left bed. "This one, the one who collapsed first, his body shows all the signs of extreme quirk exhaustion, malnutrition, and a history of severe physical trauma. His bones bear the microscopic fractures of dozens of heel breaks. His ligament density is abnormal. This is, without a doubt, the Izuku Midoriya we know." She then pointed to the boy on the right, the duplicate. "This one is pristine. Vitals are perfect. Textbook perfect. There's no sign of trauma, no scar tissue, no bone damage. It's like a factory new model. His body is flawless." Aizawa's gaze sharpened. "And his mental state? That's the strangest part," Recovery Girl admitted, turning from the monitors. "The original Midoriya is in a deep, non-REM sleep, consistent with quirk burnout. But the duplicate, there's nothing. The EEG shows only basic autonomic brainstem activity. Breathing, heartbeat, temperature regulation. There's no higher cognitive function. It's a body without a mind. A beautiful, healthy, living shell." Toshinori stopped pacing, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "A shell? You mean one for all? It built him a spare body? A better one?" The implication hung heavy in the air. A quirk that had grown too powerful for its containers, a power that broke its wielder's bones, had it finally solved the problem by simply building a more suitable container? The door hissed open and Principal Niza entered, his expression uncharacteristically somber. "I've reviewed all footage and Aizawa's report," the principal said, his paws clasped behind his back. "The working theory is that when young Midoriya pushed his body past its absolute structural limit, the vast energy of One for All, in a moment of catastrophic self-preservation, did the only thing it could to vent the excess power without killing the host. It used it as raw material. To create life?" Aizawa scoffed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "That's not a quirk, that's a miracle. Or a nightmare. The line between the two is often a matter of perspective," Niza said calmly. "For now, this is a secret of the highest order. The official story for Class 1A is that Midoriya suffered a severe and unusual quirk backlash, resulting in a temporary comatose state. The existence of the duplicate is known only to us in this room. We cannot allow this to get out. The implications are staggering." Toshinori sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "This is my fault. I passed this burden to him, this living storm. I knew it was growing stronger with each generation, but I never imagined. This is not the time for guilt, All Might." Aizawa cut in, his voice firm. "It's time for answers. And the only person who can give them to us is currently asleep." As if on cue, a soft groan came from the left bed. All three of them turned. Izuku, the original Izuku, was stirring. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. His vision was blurry, the world a wash of white and pale colors. A splitting headache hammered at his skull. His entire body felt like one massive, throbbing bruise. Uraraka," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "Is she okay?" "She's fine, Midoriya. You saved her." Aizawa's voice came from his right, a grounding presence in his sea of disorientation. Izuku blinked, his vision slowly clearing. He saw Aizawa-sensei, a gaunt All Might, and Recovery Girl all staring at him with an intensity that made his stomach clench. He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness and pain forced him back down. What happened?" he asked. "I remember, the building, and a lot of light." His eyes drifted to the side, past the concerned faces of his mentors. He saw the other bed. He saw the other patient. He saw himself. The world stopped. The humming of the machines faded. The air in his lungs froze. Staring up at the ceiling, his face a perfect, placid mask, was him. His hair. His face. His body. Lying perfectly still. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A cold dread, colder than any fear he had ever felt facing a villain, washed over him. It was a deep, existential terror, the kind that unravels your understanding of reality. No. No, 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 no. That's not real. It's a dream. A hallucination from the backlash. He squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them again. The other him was still there, his breathing hitched, turning into ragged, panicked gasps. The heart monitor beside his bed began to shriek, its steady beep escalating into a frantic alarm. Midoriya, calm down! Aizawa's voice was sharp, but Izuku couldn't hear him. He was trapped in a feedback loop of horror. That thing on the other bed was him, but he was here. How could there be two? Was he the copy? Was that the real him, dead on the bed? His thoughts spiraled into an incoherent vortex of panic. Get away. I have to get away from it. I have to get out of here. It wasn't a coherent thought. It was a primal, desperate scream from the very core of his being. He didn't want to run with his legs. He wanted his soul to flee. He recoiled from the sight, from the very concept of it, with every ounce of his will. And then, something lurched. It was not a physical sensation. It was a feeling of profound, metaphysical whiplash. It felt like his consciousness, his very point of view, was being forcibly ripped from its moorings. There was a sickening, twisting sensation, like being pulled through an impossibly narrow tunnel, a brief moment of non-existence in a void of crushing pressure, and then a sudden, jarring snap. The world returned. But it was different. The blinding headache was gone. The deep, full-body ache had vanished. The feeling of exhaustion had been replaced by a sensation of pure, vibrant energy. He took a breath, and his lungs felt massive, clean, and incredibly efficient. The air tasted crisp and sweet. He was sitting up. He hadn't told his body to, but it was. He looked down at his hands. They were his hands, but they were wrong. The calluses were there, but fainter. He looked closer, at the knuckles on his right hand. The scars, the fine, silvery lines from the sports festival, from muscular, from overhaul, were gone. His skin was smooth, unblemished. Perfect. A jolt of adrenaline, cold and sharp, shot through him. He slowly turned his head. He looked at the other bed. He saw his own face, the face he knew from the mirror every day, slack-jawed and pale, his scarred hands resting limply on the sheets. As he watched, the body that had been stirring just moments ago, the body that had been panicking, suddenly went limp. The head lolled to the side, the eyes now vacant, staring at nothing. The frantic beeping of the heart monitor slowed, returning to a steady, placid rhythm. He had left. He had jumped ship. He was here, and the boy in that bed, the original, scarred, tired Izuku Midoriya, was now the empty shell. All Might let out a choked gasp. Aizawa, for the first time since they had met, looked truly, utterly shocked, his eyes wide, his jaw tight. Young Midoriya. All Might whispered, his voice trembling as he looked at the boy who was now sitting up, the boy with the flawless hands. Izuku looked from the empty vessel in the other bed, back to his own perfect hands, and then to the horrified faces of his mentors. The power of One for All hummed within him, not as a raging storm threatening to break its cage, but as a placid, deep ocean, perfectly content within its new home. He felt strong. He felt whole. He felt better. And that realization was the most terrifying thing of all. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a dry, croaking sound came out. The sheer, cosmic wrongness of his situation crashed down on him, a weight far heavier than any collapsing building. He was a pilot in a new machine, looking back at his old, discarded chassis. His voice, when he finally found it, was a fragile, trembling whisper that filled the sterile silence of the room. What have I become? The room had no windows. The walls were a seamless, matte gray, composed of a sound-dampening alloy that swallowed every stray noise, creating a heavy, pressing silence. It was one of Principal Nisa's many hidden sanctums within UA, a place for conversations that could never be overheard, for secrets that could shift the balance of their world. Today, it felt less like a strategy room and more like an interrogation chamber, or perhaps a confessional. Izuku sat on a stark metal chair, his posture unnaturally perfect. He was in the new body, the other body, and the sensation was a constant, distracting hum beneath his thoughts. There was no dull ache in his lumbar spine from years of strenuous training. There was no phantom twinge in his right arm. His lungs didn't feel tight from the lingering exhaustion of the battle drill. He felt clean. It was a deeply unsettling feeling, like wearing someone else's impeccably tailored suit. Across the small table, Toshinori Yagi looked like a ghost haunting his own legacy. His already gaunt frame seemed to have shrunk further, his blue eyes wide and shadowed with a terrifying mixture of awe and paternal dread. He kept glancing from Izuku to the door, as if expecting the other body to walk in at any moment, a physical paradox that his mind simply refused to accept. Principal Nizu, perched on a booster seat to see over the table, was the calm center of their hurricane. His beady black eyes held a spark of intense, almost unnerving intellectual curiosity. He was observing, analyzing, cataloging. He was faced with an impossibility, and his first instinct was not to fear it, but to understand it. Let us begin with a clear and concise nomenclature, for the sake of clarity. Nizu started, his voice placid. He steepled his small paws. The body you currently inhabit, the one created during the incident, we will refer to as Echo. The original body, currently recovering in the infirmary underguard, we will call Origin. Do you find these terms acceptable, young Midoriya? Izuku flinched at his own name. Which one of them was Midoriya now? He swallowed, the motion feeling smooth and foreign in this new throat. Why, yes, sir. That's fine, excellent. Nizu chirped, though the sound lacked its usual cheer. Now please recount the experience. The moment of transition. From your perspective, what did it feel like to transfer your consciousness from Origin to Echo? Izuku took a shaky breath, forcing himself to relive the moment of pure, unadulterated panic in the infirmary. I was looking at it, he said, gesturing vaguely towards the door, towards the other version of himself. I was terrified. I didn't understand. My mind just screamed. It wasn't a thought, it was just a feeling. A need to get away. To be somewhere else. And then... He shuddered, rubbing his unblemished arms. It was like being pulled backwards through a keyhole. Everything went dark and tight, like I was being squeezed out of existence. There was this awful, ripping feeling. Not painful, but fundamental. Like a page being torn out of a book. Then there was a snap, and I was just here. In this body. Looking back at the Origin body, Toshinori made a pained noise, pressing a thin hand to his mouth. My boy, fascinating, Nizu murmured, his eyes gleaming. A transition triggered by extreme psychological distress. A fight-or-flight response on a metaphysical level. It suggests the process is instinctual, not yet under your conscious control. We must determine if you can control it. Willingly, the principal's gaze was sharp, expectant. The unspoken command was clear. Do it again. A cold knot of fear tightened in Izuku's stomach. Leave this body? This vessel of calm, effortless strength, and return to the prison of pain and exhaustion he had just escaped? The memory of the headache, the bone-deep ache, the sheer weakness was still vivid. Part of him, a primal, cowardly part, recoiled from the very idea. I don't know if I can. He stammered, his voice barely a whisper. You must try, Midoriya. Aizawa's voice cut in. He had been silent until now, a pillar of shadow leaning against the wall, his presence an anchor of grim reality. This isn't a parlor trick, it's a strategic asset and a catastrophic liability. We need to know its limits. We need to know the rules. Now, Aizawa's tone left no room for argument. Swallowing his fear, Izuku closed his eyes. He tried to recall the feeling, not of the panic, but of the intent. The desperate need to be elsewhere. He focused his will, not on his surroundings, but on a single concept, the other me. He pictured the Origin body, lying in the infirmary bed. He pictured its scarred hands, the familiar ache in its bones. He pushed his consciousness towards that image, towards that feeling of home, however broken it might be. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt a faint, magnetic pull. He latched onto it, focusing all his mental energy. The ripping sensation returned, violent and disorienting. The world dissolved into a brief, silent void. Snap. Agony. It flooded him in a single, tidal wave. The headache crashed back into his skull with the force of a hammer blow. The deep, systemic ache returned, a chorus of protest from every overstrained muscle and abused joint. He was heavy. So incredibly heavy. He gasped, a ragged, desperate intake of air, and the simple act of breathing felt laborious. He had opened his eyes. He was no longer in the secret chamber. He was back in the infirmary bed, the starched white sheets cool against his skin. Aizawa and All Might were standing over him, their faces tense. He did it, Aizawa stated, his voice flat with forced calm. Time elapsed, 4 seconds. Izuku pushed himself up on his elbows, his arms trembling from the effort. He looked past his mentors, his heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm. Through the open door of the infirmary room, he could see into the gray chamber. He saw the echo body, the one he had just inhabited. The moment his consciousness had left it, its posture had gone slack. It slumped forward in the chair, its head lolling to the side, its unblemished hands falling limply to its sides. It was still breathing, a slow, shallow rhythm, but its eyes were vacant. It was a doll, a puppet with its strings cut. It's vulnerable, Izuku breathed, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. When I'm not in it, it's just empty. Defenseless. Rule number 2 established. Niza's voice came from a small speaker on the bedside table. He was watching via a hidden camera. The inactive body enters a dormant, quasi-comatose state. Utterly vulnerable. This is the single greatest risk factor. If a villain were to discover this, they wouldn't need to defeat you in combat. They would only need to find your other self. The chilling implication settled over the room. His greatest strength was also his most profound weakness, a static, helpless target he had to protect at all costs. Let's test the primary thesis. Niza's voice continued. The reason for its existence. Young Midoriya, in your origin body, please try to channel one for all. A controlled burst, say, 30% into your index finger. Izuku nodded grimly. This, at least, was familiar territory. He held up his right hand, his scarred, aching hand, and focused. The familiar network of green energy spread across his skin. He pushed the power into his finger, feeling the strain, the familiar warning signs of a system operating near its capacity. He could do it, but it felt precarious, like holding a live wire. Okay, Niza said. Now, switch back to Echo and perform the same action. But this time, attempt 50%. Izuku's blood ran cold. 50% in a single finger would, at best, break it. At worst, it would shatter the bone into dust. But it was a test. He closed his eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and pushed. Void. Snap. The relief was instantaneous and dizzying. The pain evaporated like mist in the morning sun. He was back in the gray room, sitting in the chair, feeling light and powerful. He didn't need to be told. He held up Echo's right hand, the perfect hand, and focused. The power of One for All answered his call not as a reluctant beast to be tamed, but as an eager, loyal hound. A torrent of energy, far greater than what he just summoned, flooded his arm. Green lightning, thick and vibrant, crackled and coiled around his finger. 50%. It felt like nothing. It felt like a baseline, a comfortable hum. There was no pain, no strain, no warning signs. Just pure, clean, controllable power. He looked through the doorway at Aizawa and All Might. Their faces were pale. No recoil. All Might whispered, his voice cracking. Absolutely no physical recoil at 50%. It's as we feared, and hypothesized. Niza said, his voice laced with a grim sort of triumph. One for All has grown to a point of singularity. It is a quirk that demands a body capable of withstanding it at 100%. Your body, young Midoriya, through no fault of your own, is insufficient. In a moment of crisis, the quirk did not simply find a way to vent energy. It used that energy to construct a vessel that is sufficient. Echo is not a clone of you. It is a custom-built container for One for All. Izuku stared at the crackling energy around his finger, a terrifying thought worming its way into his mind. This isn't my body. This is the quirk's body. He forced the power down, the lightning receding instantly. He looked at his hands, then back towards the infirmary where his own tired, broken form lay sleeping. Does it have any memories? All Might asked, his voice soft. Is there anything of you in it, when you're not there? Izuku shook his head, the motion feeling alien. No. It's a blank slate. There's nothing. No thoughts, no feelings. Just an engine waiting for a driver. When I'm in it, I have all my memories, all my thoughts. It's me. But the body itself, it's just a thing. Rule number 4. Nisa summarized. Echo is a vessel, animated by your consciousness, but possessing no identity of its own. The principal paused, letting the weight of their discoveries settle. 4 simple rules that had completely upended Izuku Midoriya's life. 1. He could transfer his consciousness between 2 bodies, a process that was jarring and required intense focus. 2. The inactive body was completely vulnerable. 3. The echo body could handle one for all at vastly higher percentages without recoil. 4. The echo body was a mindless shell, a perfect tool waiting to be used. The cover-up, then, becomes our highest priority, Nisa finally said, his tone shifting from analytical to commanding. The official story is, as we discussed, a severe quirk backlash. It will explain your temporary absence from class, and should you choose to utilize Echo for hero work, the sudden, dramatic increase in your performance can be attributed to a breakthrough in your recovery. Your occasional fatigue and distraction while in your origin body will also be consistent with this narrative, he continued. But we cannot risk the origin body being left unattended in the infirmary, nor can we risk the echo body being discovered in your dorm room. The solution must be discreet and absolute. Nisa's plan was, as always, meticulously brilliant and chillingly pragmatic. A hidden room, an addendum to the blueprints of the Heights Alliance dorms that would never exist on any official records. A section of wall in Izuku's own room would be replaced with a silent, seamless door, operated by a biometric scanner keyed only to him, Aizawa, and All Might. Inside would be a small, comfortable, and medically advanced chamber. It would contain a bed with integrated biometric monitoring that would feed directly to Recovery Girl's private server, allowing her to keep an eye on the dormant body's vitals at all times. The construction will be handled overnight by my most trusted contractors, Nisa finished. They are accustomed to unusual requests. By morning you will have a sanctuary for your other self, a secret you 3 will carry. He paused. And you, young Midoriya, will carry the burden of living it. Later that night, the infirmary was silent. Under Aizawa's watchful eye, Izuku had switched back to his origin body one last time. The transition was no less agonizing. He felt the weight of his own history crash back into him, a familiar, unwelcome cloak of pain. He was discharged, with strict orders from Recovery Girl to rest. He walked back to the Heights Alliance dorm, every step an effort. The dorm was quiet, his classmates thankfully asleep. He felt their absence as a blessing. How could he face them? How could he smile and pretend that he hadn't just been fractured in 2? His room was the same as he'd left it. All Might posters on the wall, notebooks stacked high on his desk, the faint smell of old paper and sheer determination. But it felt different now. It felt like a cage. A soft knock came at his door. He opened it to find All Might, looking even more frail under the dim hallway light. Just checking in, my boy, he said softly, stepping inside. He didn't ask how Izuku was feeling. The exhaustion was written plainly on his face. Instead, his eyes scanned the room, finally landing on the wall beside Izuku's desk. It looked solid, unchanged. But they both knew what was behind it. Earlier, while Izuku had been recovering, he and Aizawa had performed the strangest, most macabre task of his life. He had, while inhabiting the echo body, carried his own sleeping form from the infirmary to the dorms via a series of secret tunnels Nisa had revealed. The experience was seared into his brain, the feeling of his own unconscious body, warm and breathing but utterly limp, in his arms. It wasn't heavy. The echo body was absurdly strong, but the psychological weight was crushing. He had felt like a body snatcher, a ghoul carrying his own corpse. He had placed his origin self on its bed, then switched, the jarring transition leaving him gasping on the mattress as the perfect echo slumped into a waiting chair. Then, After Nizu's contractors had finished their silent, efficient work, he had switched one last time, carried the dormant echo into the newly built chamber, laid it on the medical bed, and sealed the door. He was alone, with his two selves. "It's a lot to ask of you, Izuku," All Might said, his voice thick with emotion. "To keep a secret this large. To live a double life, I don't have a choice," Izuku replied, his voice flat. He walked over to the section of wall, the one that looked like all the others, and placed a hand against it. It was cool to the touch. He could almost feel the presence of the other body on the other side, silent and perfect. He closed his eyes, concentrating for just a moment. Not enough to switch, but enough to feel the connection, the faint magnetic pull. And with it, the allure. The promise of a world without pain, without limits. He practiced the switch again, right there in the safety of his room. Snap! He was in the hidden chamber. It was small, Spartan, but comfortable. The air was cool and filtered. He was lying on the bed. He sat up, the motion effortless. He felt the hum of One for All, a deep, calm wellspring of power. He rolled his shoulders. No pain. He stretched his fingers. No stiffness. He stood up and did 10 push-ups, each one as easy as breathing. He felt incredible. A giddy, dangerous sense of freedom washed over him. This is what a hero should feel like. The thought came, unbidden and potent. This was the strength he needed to save everyone, to live up to the legacy in his hands. The temptation to just stay was overwhelming. He could live in here. He could be Echo. He could be the perfect Deku. The hero everyone needed. Let the tired, broken Izuku Midoriya sleep. A cold dread accompanied the thought. If he did that, what would he be? Just a ghost in a puppet? With a surge of will, he forced the switch. Snap! He was back on his bedroom floor, gasping, the abrupt return of his body's aches and pains a form of torture. It was like putting on a heavy, ill-fitting coat that was still damp from a winter storm. The contrast was brutal. The freedom of Echo made the limitations of his origin body feel 1,000 times more acute. He looked at his scarred hands, and for the first time in his life, he felt a flicker of genuine resentment towards them. They were a symbol of his struggle, yes, but now they were also a symbol of his weakness. All Might watched him, his expression filled with a profound sadness. "Be careful, my boy," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He placed a bony hand on Izuku's shoulder. One for All has always been a part of its user, not the other way around. It's a torch passed from hand to hand, but it was always the person holding it who mattered most. He looked towards the hidden wall, his gaze distant and troubled. I'm afraid that in its desire to be completed, to be wielded at its fullest potential, it has given you a temptation that might cost you your very self. That body in there, it's the perfect vessel for the quirk. But Izuku Midoriya, his scars, his pain, his struggle, is the perfect vessel for the hero. Please, don't ever forget the difference. All Might squeezed his shoulder once more before quietly letting himself out, leaving Izuku alone in the oppressive silence of his room. Izuku stood there for a long time, his body aching, his mind reeling. He was fractured. Split. He was a hero with a perfect body he was scared to use, and a boy with a broken body he was starting to hate. He walked to the wall, pressing his forehead against its cool surface, as if he could see through it to the sleeping perfection within. The burden of two. It was a secret that would isolate him, a power that could save everyone, and a temptation that might just destroy him from the inside out. And as he stood there, torn between the boy he was and the weapon he could become, he felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. A week passed. A week of stifling normalcy that felt anything but normal. To the rest of Class 1A, Izuku Midoriya was recovering from a severe quirk backlash. It was a perfect, plausible lie. It explained why he was excused from afternoon heroics training, his sessions replaced with specialized quirk counseling and physical therapy with Hound Dog and Recovery Girl, a cover for his sessions with Aizawa and All Might where they drilled him on the logistics of his impossible new reality. The lie explained why he seemed perpetually exhausted, a bone-deep weariness clinging to him like a shroud. It explained the slight tremor in his hands when he reached for a textbook, the way he sometimes zoned out in the middle of a conversation, his gaze distant. His friends attributed it to the trauma of his quirk running wild. They offered him their notes, saved him seats at lunch, and gave him a wide, respectful berth when he looked too pale. They were kind, and their kindness felt like 1,000 tiny cuts. Every moment spent in his origin body was a lesson in limitation. The ache in his healed bones was a constant, low-grade thrum. His muscles, though strong, felt sluggish and heavy, still protesting the catastrophic output that had fractured his existence. He was Izuku Midoriya, the boy who had inherited a star and was slowly being consumed by its gravity. But then there were the nights. Alone in his room, with the door locked and the curtains drawn, he would perform the ritual. He would press his palm to the cool, seamless wall, wait for the whisper-quiet click, and slip into the hidden chamber. Inside, the echo body lay on its medical bed, a perfect, sleeping effigy. It was him, yet it was not. He would stand over it, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, a strange mix of revulsion and yearning swirling in his gut. And then, he would close his eyes, focus his will, and push. Void. Snap. And the world would be reborn. The pain vanished. The weariness evaporated. The oppressive weight on his soul lifted. In the echo body, he was boundless. He would spend hours in the small, sterile room, just moving. He'd stretch, feeling the effortless pull of pristine muscles. He'd hold a 40% full cowling for 10 minutes straight, the green lightning a placid, humming aura, feeling no strain at all. He could feel one for all nestled within this body, not as a raging tempest, but as a deep, calm sea of power, perfectly contained and utterly obedient. This body didn't remember the pain of broken bones. It didn't know the terror of powerlessness. It was a hero's body. A perfect form. And every time he had to switch back, the return to his origin self was a brutal, soul-crushing descent. The pain and weakness crashing back in was a physical manifestation of his own inadequacy. He would lie on his bed, gasping for breath, the familiar aches feeling like accusations. He was beginning to dread his own skin. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, during one of his therapy sessions, that the alert came. The three of them, Izuku, Aizawa, and a grim-faced All Might, were in one of Nisa's monitoring rooms, watching a live feed of Izuku practicing the switch. He had gotten the transition time down to 2 seconds, but the whiplash was still nauseating. The process remains jarring, Aizawa noted, his eyes fixed on the screen where Izuku's echo body had just slumped over. And the dormant state is a critical vulnerability. We're nowhere near ready for a field application. As if on cue, a klaxon blared through the room, a shrill, urgent tone reserved for active villain engagements. A large monitor on the wall flickered to life, showing a news helicopter's aerial view of the Kiyoshi Ward shopping district. Repeating, "We have a fluid situation unfolding near the main market," a frantic reporter's voice announced. A group of at least 5 individuals, believed to be armed with stolen support tech, are causing widespread panic. Heroes are on the scene, but the suspects are highly mobile and seem to be targeting commercial transports. The video feed zoomed in. It wasn't a high-level threat, no Nomu or PLF commander. It was a smash and grab, but a chaotic one. The villains, clad in mismatched gear that looked scavenged and illegally modified, were using high-tension grappling lines and repulsor lift boots to zip between buildings. They were fast, erratic, and creating a dangerous amount of collateral damage as they fired concussive blasts to disable armored vans. Izuku's hero instincts surged, overriding his personal misery. His hands clenched into fists. Their movement is unpredictable. They are using the verticality of the shopping center to their advantage. Heroes on the ground are having trouble keeping up. A speed-type or flight-type hero is needed to box them in. It's a low-level threat, Aizawa said, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the screen. Fat Gum and his agency are responding, but they're 5 minutes out. The local heroes are being outmaneuvered. I can do it, Izuku said, the words leaving his mouth before he could think. Both Aizawa and All Might turned to look at him. He was in his origin body, pale and trembling slightly from the last switch, but his eyes were blazing with a fire they hadn't seen in days. I can stop them, he repeated, his voice firm. This is the perfect scenario. It's not a powerhouse villain. It's about speed, precision, and crowd control. It's a test case, a controlled, real-world application. Let me go as Echo. All Might immediately shook his head. Absolutely not, my boy. It's too soon. The secret is too fragile. What if someone sees you switch? What if the dormant body is discovered? The risks of letting them cause a panic and potentially hurt civilians are more immediate. Izuku countered, a desperate edge to his voice. He hated arguing with his mentor, but this was a burning certainty in his gut. I can be there in less than a minute. I can end it before Fat Gum even arrives. No one will get hurt. I can control it. I know I can. Aizawa was silent, his gaze intense and calculating. He looked at the frantic scene on the monitor, then back at the fierce determination in his student's eyes. This wasn't just about playing the hero. This was about proving something. To them, and to himself. You would be deployed solo, Aizawa said, his voice a low gravel. I will be on site, in stealth, monitoring from a distance. All Might will be on a private comms channel with you. The moment I deem the situation compromised, the moment your identity is at risk, I will give the abort signal. You will disengage immediately, no questions asked. You will find a secure location and switch back. Is that understood? Izuku's heart leaped. It wasn't a no. Yes, sensei. Crystal clear. All Might looked like he wanted to protest further, his face a mask of profound worry, but he saw the resolve in both Aizawa's and Izuku's expressions. He let out a long, weary sigh. Be careful, Izuku. Please! There was no time to waste. Izuku sprinted from the monitoring room, his aching legs protesting as he ran through the empty halls of UA. He didn't feel the pain. Adrenaline was a powerful anesthetic. He burst into his room, locked the door, and activated the hidden panel. He stepped inside the cool, dark chamber. Echo lay waiting, perfect and still. This is it. Not a test. Not a drill. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. He focused his will, picturing the mission, the need for speed, the people he had to protect. Void. Snap. The world returned in a flash of vibrant, painless clarity. He was sitting up on the medical bed, the echo body humming with latent power. The faint headache, the dull ache, the shortness of breath, all gone. He felt light. He felt powerful. He felt ready. He looked back at his origin body, which had slumped to the floor just inside the chamber, its expression slack, its scarred hands resting limply. A pang of something, pity? Disgust, shot through him, but he crushed it down. There was no time. He slipped an earpiece in, a direct line to All Might and Aizawa. "Comm check. I'm active," he said, his voice coming out strong and clear. "Loud and clear, my boy." All Might's anxious voice crackled in his ear. "Be safe, status confirmed," came Aizawa's clipped response. "I'm en route. Proceed with deployment. Do not engage until you are on site." "Roger," Izuku said. He stood up, rolling his shoulders. He channeled One for All, and the green lightning that answered was not a chaotic storm but a perfectly woven cloak of energy. 45% full cowling. It felt as natural as breathing. He couldn't just walk out the front door. He needed to be a ghost. He opened the chamber door, stepped into his room, and slid open his balcony door. The afternoon sun was bright. He was on the third floor. It was a long way down. Without a moment's hesitation, he crouched, pouring more power into his legs. 50%. 55%. The energy surged without a hint of pain or resistance. He leaped. The world became a smear of green and blue. He wasn't just jumping, he was flying. He soared over the rooftops of the Heights Alliance building, over the manicured lawns of UA, a silent green comet against the afternoon sky. He landed on the perimeter wall, 100 meters away. Without a sound, the impact absorbed effortlessly. He leaped again, a massive, parabolic arc that carried him over entire city blocks. The wind roared past his ears, a triumphant symphony. This was freedom. This was power. ETA 30 seconds, he reported, his voice steady despite the exhilarating speed. He landed on the roof of a skyscraper overlooking the Kiyoshi Ward Market. Below him, chaos reigned. The 5 tech thieves, who the news was now calling the scrappers, were zipping through the air like erratic insects, laughing as they took potshots at police barricades. "I have visual," he said into his comm. 5 targets. Disorganized, overconfident. Their gear is powerful but has a noticeable charge-up time on the repulsors. I can exploit that. Analysis is sound. Aizawa's voice returned. What's your plan, Blitzkrieg? Izuku stated simply. Take them all out before they can react. He didn't wait for a reply. He dove off the 30-story building. To the people below, it was as if a thunderbolt had fallen from a clear sky. A streak of green lightning descended into the heart of the chaos, landing with a ground-shaking but perfectly controlled impact that cracked the pavement in a perfect circle but harmed no one. The scrappers froze, their laughter dying in their throats. There, in the center of the crater, stood Deku. But he looked different. More solid. More intense. The green energy crackling around him was brighter, more defined. He stood with an unnerving stillness, an apex predator that had just joined the fray. Party's over, Deku said, his voice calm and carrying with authority. One of the scrappers, the apparent leader, scoffed. Look what we got here. A Yui brat. There's 5 of us and 1 of you, hero. You do the math. He and 2 others aimed their arm-mounted cannons at Izuku. Izuku's mind was a blur of calculations. 3 targets, frontal assault. 2 flanking from above. The cannons require a 1.2-second charge cycle. My window is now. He vanished. In the space between one heartbeat and the next he moved. A 50% full cowling burst. He wasn't a blur. He was simply gone from where he stood, and now he was among them. The leader gasped, finding Deku directly in front of him. Before he could pull the trigger, a hand chopped down on his arm, not with bone-breaking force, but with perfect, pinpoint precision, hitting the main power conduit of his weapon. It sparked and died. A follow-up kick to the chest, reinforced with just enough power to knock the wind out of him and send him skidding into a storefront. Incapacitated but not seriously injured, the other 2 fired, but they were shooting at empty air. Izuku was already moving, a fluid phantom weaving between their concussive blasts. He used air force, not with a flick of a finger, but with a full-handed shove, creating a massive cushion of air that slammed the 2 remaining ground-level thugs into each other. They collapsed in a heap, tangled in their own grappling lines. 3 down. Time elapsed, 4 seconds. The 2 from above stared in shock. What the hell? He's too fast! One yelled, firing his repulsor boots to gain altitude. Izuku kicked off the side of a building, a spider of green lightning, running straight up the glass facade. The civilians below gasped, pointing in disbelief. He shot past the 10th floor, the 20th, pushing off the wall and launching himself into the air after them. He was in their element now, a warrior in a zero-gravity battlefield. One of the thugs panicked, firing wildly. Izuku twisted in midair, the blast sailing harmlessly past him. He channeled a stream of OFA into his legs and kicked the air itself. Another, more focused Air Force blast that acted as a midair course correction, propelling him directly at the first airborne scrapper. He didn't punch him. He grabbed the front of his vest, his momentum carrying them both in a dizzying arc. With his other hand, he expertly disabled the thug's repulsor pack. Then, using a spinning throw taught to him by Gunhead, he flung the man downwards, not onto the hard pavement, but into a large, inflatable All Might mascot in the center of the plaza. The man landed with a soft thump. 4 down. The final scrapper watched in pure terror as Deku, still in the air, pivoted towards him. He was a demon of green light, his movements impossible, his power absolute. The thug gave up. He turned to flee, pushing his stolen gear to its limits. Izuku sighed. He raised a single finger, channeling a precise 50% into it. A tiny, compressed bullet of green energy shot through the air. It wasn't aimed at the villain. It struck the grappling hook at his hip, shattering the mechanism. The line went limp, and the scrapper tumbled from the sky, landing unceremoniously in a large fountain. 5 down. Total engagement time, 37 seconds. Silence fell over the market plaza. The police, the civilians, the news helicopter circling above, everyone was staring in stunned awe. Deku landed softly in the center of the street, the green lightning around him receding into a faint, calm hum. There was no heavy breathing. No broken bones. No sign of strain. He just stood there, looking at the mess, his work done. Holy wow! A news reporter stammered, her voice broadcast across the city. Incredible! In a stunning display of power and precision, the UA student Deku has single-handedly neutralized all 5 suspects in under a minute. There are no reported injuries to civilians and minimal property damage. His control, it's on a level we've never seen from him before. He looks like a seasoned pro hero. Young Midoriya. All Might's voice in his ear was choked with emotion. That was flawless. Izuku felt a surge of pride so potent it was almost intoxicating. This was it. This was the hero he was always meant to be. Powerful, efficient, perfect. He had saved everyone, and it had cost him nothing. Job's done, Deku. Disengage. Aizawa's voice cut through his reverie, sharp and grounding. Now. Before Fat Gum's agency arrives and starts asking questions. Right. The secret. With a final, heroic-looking nod to the stunned police officers, Izuku leaped, another massive, high-powered bound that carried him back onto the rooftops and out of sight. He moved from building to building, a silent shadow putting distance between himself and the scene of his triumph. He found a secluded spot, a ventilation hub on top of an old, abandoned office building, and crouched behind a large air conditioning unit. The city spread out before him, glittering in the sun. He had done it. He took a moment, savoring the feeling. The quiet hum of power, the absence of pain, the cool confidence that saturated his every thought. He felt like he could stay here forever. Report, Aizawa's voice demanded. All clear. Disengaged. Moving to switch, he replied. He stood up and took one last look at the city he had just protected so effortlessly. Then, he made the switch. Void. Snap. The return was more brutal than ever before. It was like being thrown from a penthouse suite into a dumpster. The world came rushing back, accompanied by the familiar chorus of aches and pains. The faint, throbbing headache returned. His legs felt like lead. A wave of nausea and dizziness washed over him, and he had to lean against the grimy AC unit to keep from falling. He was back in his own skin, and it felt like a punishment. He was weak. He was fragile. He was pathetic. He looked at his hands, at the faint, silvery lines of his scars. They weren't badges of honor anymore. They were marks of failure. Proof that this body was unequal to the task. He looked out at the city again. And a dangerous, seductive thought, crystalline and sharp, formed in the quiet of his mind. Maybe this is for the best. The world needs that perfect hero they just saw. They need Deku. This body, this weak, aching body, it can be Izuku Midoriya. It can go to classes, do homework, talk to friends. It can be the face. But the hero, the real hero, that can be Echo. It was a perfect division of labor. A perfect solution. He could protect his friends from the danger, protect his body from the strain, and give the world the flawless symbol it needed. He could amputate the struggling, pain part of himself and let the perfect part take over when it mattered most. The thought didn't feel monstrous. It felt logical. It felt right. A vibration in his pocket pulled him from his reverie. It was his phone. A text from Uraraka. OMG DKU, I just saw the news. You were amazing. Are you okay? Followed immediately by one from Ida. Midoriya. Your performance was exemplary. A textbook execution of villain incapacitation. However, I trust you are not overexerting yourself during your recovery period. Rest is paramount. He stared at the screen, the cheerful messages feeling like they were from another universe. He had to get back. He had to put on the face of Izuku Midoriya, the recovering student. The journey back was a slow, painful trek. Every step was an effort. When he finally stumbled into the Heights Alliance common room, Uraraka and Ida rushed over to him, their faces bright with excitement. Deku, you were incredible! Uraraka gushed, her eyes sparkling. That move where you ran up the building! It was like something out of a movie, indeed! Ida chopped the air with his hand. Your sudden leap in skill and control is a testament to your diligent rehabilitation. A truly inspiring sight. They were looking at him, their faces beaming with pride. But they weren't seeing him. Not the real him. They were seeing the afterimage of the perfect hero on the television screen. They couldn't see the haggard, exhausted boy standing before them, leaning subtly against the doorframe for support, his head pounding. You look a little pale, though. Uraraka said, her brow furrowing with concern as she looked closer. And you're trembling. Did you push yourself too hard? Izuku felt the lie form on his lips, easy and smooth. He summoned the energy to stand up straight and forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as brittle as it felt. I'm okay, guys. Really? He said, his voice a little too hoarse. Just a little tired from my therapy session. It takes a lot out of me. The lie settled over him like a physical weight, cold and heavy. They bought it, their expressions softening from excitement to sympathy. They saw the hero on TV, and they saw the tired boy in front of them, and their brains connected the two with the story he had given them. And it worked. But as Uraraka and Ida began fussing over him, suggesting he sit down and have some tea, Izuku's smile felt like a mask of cracking porcelain. He was playing a part, and the applause was for someone else, someone better. He glanced at his reflection in the dark screen of the common room TV. He looked pale, gaunt, and so very, very tired. A world away from the vibrant, confident hero the whole city was now talking about. The disconnect was a physical chasm, and he was standing on one side, looking at the perfect version of himself on the other, wondering if he would ever be able to bridge the gap. Or a darker part of him whispered, if he should even try. The new routine settled in with a disquieting ease. It was a life cleaved in two, a meticulously choreographed dance between two cells. There was Izuku Midoriya, the student, and there was Deku, the hero. And with each passing day, the line between the two became a stark, unbreachable wall. Mornings were for Izuku. He would wake in his origin body, the familiar aches a grim symphony heralding the dawn. He would force down the nutritious, high-calorie breakfast Ida insisted upon, the food tasting like ash in his mouth. He would walk to class with his friends, his movements feeling sluggish, his mind shrouded in a fog of perpetual fatigue. He sat through lectures on applied hero law and advanced mathematics, his pen scratching across paper, his hand, his real, scarred hand, feeling clumsy and weak. His friends were a constant, painful reminder of the chasm that had opened in his life. Uraraka would look at him with worried eyes, offering him a mochi, her brow furrowed. Are you sure you're getting enough sleep, Deku? You have dark circles under your eyes. He would force a smile and nod, claiming his new therapy regimen was just intense. Ida would lecture him on the importance of REM cycles, his rigid concern a testament to his unwavering friendship, a friendship Izuku felt he was betraying with every breath. He was a ghost haunting his own life. During lunch, he would sit with his friends, but his mind would be elsewhere, calculating. There's a patrol route in the Kamino ward that's been seeing increased activity. I could cover it in 20 minutes as Echo. That leaves me an hour to study before Aizawa-sensei's evening training. He would nod and smile as Tsuyu Ajiri talked about her siblings, but he wasn't really there. He was a phantom, his true self waiting, dormant and perfect, behind a hidden wall. Afternoons were when the shift happened. His therapy sessions provided the perfect cover. He would retreat to his room, lock the door, and perform the now familiar ritual, void. Snap. And then, he would be Deku. The transformation was a euphoric release, a baptism of power. In the Echo body, the world was sharp, vibrant, and filled with limitless potential. He would spend hours with Aizawa in secured training grounds, pushing the limits of his new form. 60% full cowling became his new baseline, a comfortable cruising speed that allowed him to move like a low-flying jet. He mastered his new abilities with terrifying speed. He learned to use Black Whip, not as a chaotic, emotional outburst, but as a precise, controlled extension of his will. The tendrils of dark energy erupted from Echo's body with no resistance, no feedback, weaving into intricate nets and powerful grappling hooks at his command. Danger Sense, once a migraine-inducing sensory overload, became a refined, tactical tool. In the Echo body it was a cool, clear hum at the back of his skull, feeding him precise data about incoming threats without the accompanying pain. He could see an attack before it was launched, not as a flash of agony, but as a highlighted trajectory in his mind's eye. His performance was, in a word, legendary. During combat drills, he was untouchable. He would spar against his classmates, and it wasn't a fight, it was a demonstration. He would disarm Kirishima's unbreakable form with pressure point strikes, outmaneuver Ida's recipro burst with effortless grace, and dissipate Todoroki's massive fireballs with perfectly calculated Delaware smashes that created precise countercurrents of air. His classmates were in awe. "It's insane," Kaminari said one evening, watching Deku's highlight reel from the day's training on his phone. "It's like his quirk backlash completely rewired him. He's a monster. His precision is what's most astounding," Yaoyorozu commented, her analytical mind working overtime. "To wield such overwhelming power with such minuscule collateral damage. It defies everything we've been taught about power-type quirks." They saw the hero. They saw the results. They didn't see the cost. They didn't see that after every dazzling performance, Izuku would retreat to his room, switch back, and collapse onto his bed in his origin body, gasping and trembling, the accumulated stress of the day hitting his fragile system like a physical blow. He was living on borrowed energy. The Izuku that went to class was running on fumes, while the Deku that fought was a perfect machine. The division was becoming more than just practical. It was becoming psychological. He started to resent his origin body with a quiet, burning intensity. It was the anchor holding him back. It was the source of the pain, the fatigue, the weakness. It was the lie he had to maintain. He found himself spending more and more time as Echo, even when he didn't need to. He'd finish a training session, and instead of switching back immediately, he'd just sit in the hidden chamber for an hour, basking in the feeling of wholeness, of perfection. He'd read textbooks as Echo, finding his concentration sharper, his memory more eidetic. He started to neglect his original self. He'd skip meals because the effort of eating in his exhausted origin body felt monumental. He'd put off sleeping in his real bed, opting for an extra hour as the tireless Echo, only to switch back and find his origin body even more depleted, his head pounding from lack of proper rest and nutrition. The dark circles under his eyes Uraraka had noticed were no longer just a sign of fatigue. They were the mark of self-inflicted decay. But one person wasn't buying the story. One person saw past the awe and the whispers of prodigy. One person's gaze was sharp enough to see the cracks in the facade. Katsuki Bakugo. He watched Izuku with a simmering, suspicious glare. He saw the pathetic, shuffling nerd in class, the one who sometimes dropped his pencil because his hand was trembling. And he saw the terrifying, flawless god of combat on the training field. And his gut, honed by a lifetime of rivalry, screamed at him that the two things did not add up. This wasn't just getting better. This wasn't a breakthrough. This was a fundamental alteration. The Deku he knew was a reckless, muttering crybaby who won through grit and self-destruction. He was a hero forged in pain, every victory paid for in blood and broken bones. This new Deku, this thing that moved with the cold, effortless perfection of a machine, it was wrong. It was an imposter. The confrontation happened late one night. Izuku was making his way back from the kitchens, a glass of water in his hand, feeling the familiar, heavy exhaustion settling into his bones. He turned a corner and found Bakugo blocking the hallway, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, his red eyes narrowed into slits. "Kaken," Izuku said, his voice quiet. "I need to get by." Bakugo didn't move. He just stared, his gaze sweeping over Izuku, taking in the pale skin, the faint tremor in his hand holding the glass, the weary slump of his shoulders. "You look like shit," Bakugo stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I'm just tired," Izuku mumbled, trying to sidestep him. Bakugo's arm shot out, slamming against the wall and blocking his path. The glass of water slipped from Izuku's trembling hand, shattering on the floor. "Don't lie to me," Bakugo snarled, pushing off the wall and getting in Izuku's face. The air crackled with unspoken aggression. "I've been watching you, Deku. In class, you look like a walking corpse. You can barely hold a goddamn pen. But then, out on the field, you're perfect. Too perfect." He jabbed a finger into Izuku's chest. "There's no hesitation. No muttering. No second-guessing. You move like you already know the outcome. That flawless power, that cold-ass precision, it's not you. It's like you're wearing a mask. A perfect, boring, unbeatable mask. So I'll ask you again. What the hell did you do?" Izuku's blood ran cold. He couldn't tell him. The secret was too big, too dangerous. It was a burden he had to carry alone. He met Bakugo's furious gaze, his own fear warring with a desperate need to lie. I don't know what you're talking about, Izuku said, his voice shaking despite his best efforts. My quirk, it's stabilized. Aizawa-sensei and recovery girl, don't you dare feed me that bullshit. Bakugo exploded, grabbing the front of Izuku's shirt and slamming him back against the wall. The impact sent a jolt of pain through Izuku's aching spine. I know you. I know every stupid, self-sacrificing twitch you have. The Deku who wins is the one who's willing to break himself to do it. This new you doesn't even break a sweat. It's not natural. It's not human. Bakugo's face was inches from his eyes burning with a terrifying mix of rage and a sliver of something else, a desperate, frustrated concern. He wasn't just angry at the deception, he was angry at the distance. The rival he had finally, grudgingly, come to acknowledge as an equal was suddenly gone, replaced by an untouchable enigma. Tell me, you damn nerd, Bakugo whispered, his voice raw with intensity. What did that power do to you? Izuku could only stare back, his heart hammering in his chest, his silence the only answer he could give. He couldn't confess. He couldn't break. Seeing the terrified, stubborn refusal in Izuku's eyes, Bakugo's face twisted into a snarl of pure disgust. He shoved Izuku away, sending him stumbling back over the shattered glass. Fine, Bakugo spat, his voice dripping with venom. Keep your damn secrets. Hide inside whatever cheap trick you've cooked up. But don't think for a second I don't see you. I see you, you fraud. He turned and stalked away, his footsteps echoing down the silent hall, leaving Izuku alone with the broken glass and the even more shattered pieces of their fragile, evolving relationship. A new, deeper rift had been torn open, one built not on rivalry, but on a foundation of lies and suspicion. Izuku sank to the floor, his legs giving out. He didn't care about the shards of glass. He wrapped his arms around himself, trembling uncontrollably. Bakugo was right. He was a fraud. He was hiding, and the worst part was, he was starting to prefer the mask to his own face. The incident with Bakugo was a tipping point. The psychological toll of his double life, which had been a slow, creeping poison, now became a torrent. The shame and the exhaustion were relentless. His performance as Izuku Midoriya, the student, deteriorated sharply. He was late for class twice in 1 week. He failed a pop quiz in English because his mind was so foggy he couldn't concentrate on the questions. During a casual conversation with Uraraka and Ida, he called Uraraka by the wrong name. A simple slip-up born of sheer mental exhaustion that left her looking hurt and confused. He was becoming a stranger to his friends, and a stranger to himself. The only place he felt competent, the only place he felt real, was in the cold, sterile confines of the hidden chamber, inhabiting a body that wasn't truly his. The neglect of his origin body worsened. One morning, he was practicing a complex black whip maneuver as Echo, losing track of time. He was supposed to meet All Might for an early morning talk, a check-in on his mental state. He realized he was late, and in his panic, he switched back. He found himself on the floor of the hidden chamber, having fallen out of the chair he'd left his origin body in hours ago. The switch was a brutal shock to his system. He hadn't eaten since lunch the previous day. He hadn't slept in his real bed. His body, already weak, was now severely dehydrated and hypoglycemic. He tried to stand, but a violent wave of vertigo sent him crashing back to the floor. The room spun. A cold sweat broke out across his skin. His vision grayed at the edges. I have to get up, he thought, his mind sluggish. All Might is waiting. He managed to crawl out of the hidden chamber, sealing the wall behind him. He collapsed onto his bed, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. He felt a profound, terrifying weakness, a feeling of his own body actively shutting down. He must have passed out. He was jolted awake some time later. Not by an alarm, but by a frantic, insistent pounding on his door. Young Midoriya! Izuku, are you in there? Open the door! It was All Might's voice, tight with panic. Izuku groaned, his head feeling like it was full of shattered glass. He fumbled for his phone. It was almost noon. He had missed his meeting. He had missed his morning classes. He had been unconscious for over 3 hours. He dragged himself off the bed, his legs shaking so badly he had to cling to his desk for support. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror on his closet door, and recoiled in shock. The face staring back at him was a hollow-eyed ghoul. His skin was waxy and pale, stretched taut over his cheekbones. His lips were chapped and colorless. His hair was a matted, greasy mess. But it was his eyes that terrified him. They were sunken, lifeless, surrounded by deep, bruised-looking shadows. He looked sick. He looked like he was dying. All Might's pounding grew more frantic. "Izuku, if you don't answer, I'm breaking down this door." With the last of his strength, Izuku stumbled to the door and unlocked it. He collapsed into his mentor's arms the moment it swung open. All Might caught him, his skeletal frame surprisingly strong. He half-carried, half-dragged Izuku to the bed, his face a canvas of pure horror. "My boy, what have you done to yourself?" he whispered, his voice trembling as he took in Izuku's haggard appearance. Izuku could only shake his head, a dry, racking sob escaping his throat. He had been so enamored with the strength of the perfect form that he had forgotten to care for the fragile one. He had treated his own body like a temporary inconvenience, a prison to be escaped, and now it was breaking. The cracks weren't just in his life or his friendships. They were in his very being, and he was falling apart. He was Izuku Midoriya, and he was erasing himself. The infirmary had become a sickeningly familiar prison. The scent of antiseptic, the sterile white sheets, the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. It was a soundscape that echoed the earliest, most painful days of his journey with One for All. But this time, there were no broken bones. The damage was deeper, more insidious. Recovery Girl had been furious. Her usual scolding had been replaced by a cold, sharp anger that was far more terrifying. She had put him on a nutrient-rich food drip, her movements precise and unforgiving. Malnutrition. Severe dehydration. Exhaustion bordering on systemic collapse. She had recited, her voice like chipping ice as she listed his symptoms for a pale and shaken All Might. "You are actively destroying yourself, Izuku Midoriya. You treat your own body like a disposable tool, and you will find it has a breaking point you cannot come back from. Do you understand me?" He had nodded, the simple motion sending a wave of dizziness through him. He understood all too well. Lying there, feeling the life-giving fluid slowly seep into his veins, he was trapped in the very weakness he had tried to escape. His origin body, which he had begun to resent, was now screaming its protest in a language of pain and fatigue he could no longer ignore. He had sought perfection and found only a faster way to decay. All Might had stayed by his side, his silence a heavier condemnation than any lecture. The disappointment in his mentor's eyes was a physical weight, crushing what little spirit Izuku had left. The promise of the Echo body, once a shining beacon of hope, now felt like a curse, a Faustian bargain where the price was his own humanity. He was a pilot so enthralled with his new machine that he had forgotten to feed the person in the cockpit. He needed answers. Not from Nizu's cold logic or Aizawa's grim pragmatism. He needed guidance from the source, from the ones who had lived and died with this power, this living storm that had fractured his existence. That night, after being released back to the forced solitude of his room with strict orders for bed rest, he didn't even consider switching to Echo. The thought of that perfect, painless body felt like a betrayal to the suffering self he was now forced to inhabit. Instead, he sat on his bed in the traditional Seiza position, his back straight despite the protesting ache. He closed his eyes, filtering out the sounds of the dorm, the distant laughter from the common room, the hum of the building around him. He focused inward, past the pain and the fog of fatigue. He reached for the core of One for All, not as a source of power to be wielded, but as a place of communion. He sank into a meditative state, his breathing evening out, his mind a turbulent sea he was trying to calm. "Please," he thought, not as a coherent word but as a desperate, formless plea broadcast into the void of his own soul. "I'm lost. I don't know what to do. Help me." For a long time, there was nothing. Only the familiar, low-level hum of the quirk, a deep, resonating thrum in his bones. He almost gave up, his weary body wanting to slump over, to succumb to the exhaustion. But he held on, clinging to that single thread of intent. "Help me," and then, the world fell away. It was not the jarring, violent lurch of the switch. This was a gentle, inexorable pull, like being drawn down into the depths of a still, dark ocean. The feeling of his room, the weight of the blankets, the air on his skin, it all dissolved into a formless, gray mist. He was adrift in a sea of nothing, a silent, starless expanse. Slowly, figures began to coalesce from the swirling gray fog. They were indistinct at first, silhouettes of smoke and shadow, but they gradually gained form and substance, their presence filling the void with the weight of history. He saw them all, the 7 specters of his legacy, standing in a silent circle around him. He was in the vestige world. The throne room of One for All. He stood before them, feeling small and transparent, his recent failures laid bare for them all to see. He expected anger, disappointment, scorn. Instead, the first to step forward was Nana Shimura. Her signature smile was gone, replaced by an expression of profound, maternal concern. The mole beneath her lips seemed to emphasize the downturn of her mouth. She drifted closer, her form shimmering slightly, and reached out a spectral hand, stopping just short of touching his cheek. "Oh, my poor boy," she said, her voice a soft, melancholic echo that resonated not in his ears, but directly in his mind. "You've taken on a burden none of us could have ever imagined. You're hurting." Her sympathy was so unexpected, so pure, that it shattered the dam of his composure. A choked sob escaped him, and he felt tears he couldn't physically shed sting his spiritual eyes. I don't understand," he stammered, his voice raw. "This new body. Echo. I thought it was a gift. A way to be the hero everyone needs without breaking. But it's tearing me apart. I hate feeling so weak. I hate my own body. And I hate myself for feeling that way." A new figure moved from the circle. Daigoro Banjo, the 5th user, his lanky frame and high-collared costume unmistakable. The usual cocky, energetic glint in his eyes was gone, replaced by a grim seriousness. "Hate it? Kid, you should be terrified of it," Daigoro said, his voice a gravelly rasp. He gestured with a shadowy hand, and the gray mist around them swirled, forming an image. It was the Echo body, floating in the void, perfect and serene, crackling with a flawless aura of green lightning. "You think that thing is a gift?" Daigoro continued, his tone sharp. "You think One for All just decided to do you a favor? This quirk is not a sentient, benevolent god, 9th. It's a force of nature. It's a stockpile of raw, unimaginable power, and for generations, it's been growing. It's been straining against the limits of every vessel it's inhabited." The image of Echo pulsed with light. Haikid Shinomori, the 4th user, died because his body couldn't handle the strain of holding OFA plus his own quirk. He withered away. All Might, even in his prime, felt the immense physical toll. The quirk has been approaching a critical mass, a point where a normal human body is no longer a viable container, but a fusible link, destined to burn out. Nana Shimura floated back to his side, her expression sorrowful. "When you pushed yourself to that unprecedented limit, to save your friend, you forced the quirk into a corner. The vessel, your body, was about to rupture. The energy had to go somewhere. The collective will of this quirk, the ingrained desire to be passed on, to continue the fight, initiated a catastrophic safety protocol." "It's not a clone, kid," Daigoro cut in bluntly. "It's a release valve made manifest. It took all that excess, world-breaking energy and used the most fundamental blueprint it had, your DNA, to construct a housing unit. A perfect cage for the storm. It's not a second you. It is a physical manifestation of One for All's core desire, a prime vessel." The term hung in the void, cold and heavy. Prime vessel. It wasn't a person. It was an object. A piece of hardware. Izuku stared at the shimmering image of his perfect double. The pride he had felt in that form, the intoxicating freedom, now curdled into a cold chemical dread. He had been piloting a suit of armor, believing it was an extension of himself, only to be told it was actually a cage built for the beast he carried inside him. "But why?" Izuku asked, his voice trembling. "Why is it so tempting? Why does it feel so right to be in that body?" It was the 3rd vestige who answered. A man with a stern face and goggles perched on his forehead, and the 6th user. His voice was quieter, more somber than the others. "Because it is what the quirk wants. The power longs to be used to its fullest extent. It yearns for a vessel that will not break, that will not ache, that will not hesitate. When you are in the prime vessel, your consciousness is in perfect harmony with the raw will of one for all. There is no resistance. No friction. It is a siren song of pure, effortless power. It feels right because the quirk is finally in a body that fits. The implications were staggering. The intoxicating feeling of perfection wasn't his own. It was the quirk's contentment he was feeling, a borrowed euphoria. He was a drug addict getting high on his own power. He felt a new presence then, a gentle but powerful consciousness that had been silent until now. A thin, frail-looking man with white hair and kind, sorrowful eyes stepped forward from the mists. Yoichi Shigaraki, the first. The origin of it all. The air in the vestige world grew heavy with his ancient sadness. Yoichi looked at Izuku, not as the ninth user, but as a young man buckling under an impossible weight. His voice was not an echo, but a clear, soft whisper that felt ancient and immediate at the same time. Ninth. Izuku Midoriya, he began, using his name with a deliberate, grounding weight. The others speak the truth. Echo is a tool, a terrifying and unprecedented one, but you are beginning to see it as a replacement. And that is a path to oblivion. The gray mist swirled again, this time at Yoichi's command. It formed two images side by side. On one side was the origin body, his true body, looking as haggard as it had in the mirror. It was connected to the ground by a thick, luminous tether of light that seemed to emerge from its very core, anchoring it to an unseen foundation. On the other side floated the pristine echo body, unconnected, untethered. Your soul, your identity, yourself, Yoichi said, his spectral finger pointing to the tether of light, is anchored to your true body. It is the vessel you were born in. It is the canvas upon which your life, your pain, your joy, your struggles have been painted. Every scar, every healed bone, every ache, they are the testament to the boy named Izuku Midoriya. That anchor is who you are. He then gestured to the floating echo. The prime vessel has no such anchor. It is a hollow construct. When you transfer your consciousness, you are essentially projecting your soul into it. You are the ghost in the machine. But the anchor remains with your original self. Yoichi's expression grew grave, his kind eyes filled with a stark, terrible warning. The more you favor the vessel, the more you neglect your true body, the more that anchor weakens. He looked directly into Izuku's soul, his words striking with the force of a physical blow. It will begin to atrophy. Your connection to your own history, your own humanity, will fray. If that anchor weakens too much, ninth, if it breaks, you may become lost. The projection may become permanent. You will no longer be Izuku Midoriya, the pilot. You will become a mere component of the machine, a consciousness bound to the will of the quirk, forever trapped in a perfect, painless prison, a ghost in a puppet with no way home. The image in the mist shifted with horrifying clarity. The tether of light on the origin body flickered and thinned, becoming a fragile, spider silk thread. The echo body's eyes, once vacant, began to glow with a cold, green light, the light of one for all, pure and without a soul to temper it. The terror that seized Izuku was absolute. It was a fear beyond death. The fear of erasure. Of ceasing to be himself, his consciousness swallowed by the very power he was meant to command, to become a mindless engine of heroism, all his love, his fear, his dreams, his very identity sacrificed for the sake of a perfect weapon. No, he breathed, stumbling back from the horrific vision. No, I won't. I can't. It is a path you are already on, Nana Shimura said gently, her voice full of sorrow. By hating your body, you are hating your anchor. By neglecting it, you are letting it decay. You must cherish it, ninth. You must cherish the struggle. The pain is proof that you are still human. It is the price of your soul. This isn't a choice between a weak body and a strong one, Daigoro added, his voice low. It's a choice between being Izuku Midoriya and being a walking, talking quirk. You gotta decide which one you want to be, kid. The weight of their words, the sheer, cosmic gravity of his situation, pressed down on him. He wasn't just fighting villains anymore. He was fighting for his own soul against the siren song of his own power. He had to find a way to re-embrace the pain, to accept the weakness, to strengthen the anchor before it was too late. He was about to ask them how, How could he possibly do that, when a new sensation intruded upon the timeless void? It was a distant, frantic pulse, an external alarm cutting through the gray mist. Beep. 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 It was his phone. A high-priority alert. The vestige world around him began to tremble, the images flickering, the faces of his predecessors starting to dissolve back into smoke. Your time is up, Yoichi said, his form fading. Remember, ninth. The hero is the one who struggles. The weapon is the one that does not. Do not become the weapon. The world dissolved. With a gut-wrenching lurch, Izuku was violently jolted back into his own body. He was on his bed, gasping, the cold sweat of his psychic journey clinging to his skin. The beeping was loud, insistent. It was a custom tone Nisa had installed on his phone, a direct, top-priority hero alert. He snatched the phone, his hand trembling. The message on the screen was stark, a single block of text from the principal's secure server. High-end NOMU cited. Musudafu Industrial Port. Designation Jaeger. Counter-strength/speed quirk specialization. Evacuation in progress. Pro-heroes engaging, heavy resistance. DKU deployment requested. Maximum power required. Maximum power required. The words echoed the warning he had just received. The world needed the weapon. They needed the flawless power of the prime vessel. He looked at his shaking, scarred hands. He felt the profound ache in his bones, the exhaustion that clung to him like a disease. He could go as he was, as Izuku Midoriya, and be little more than a liability. He would be destroyed. Or he could unleash the perfect hero, the ghost in the puppet, and save everyone. The faces of the vestiges flashed in his mind. The more you favor the vessel, the more your anchor weakens. It's a choice between being Izuku Midoriya and being a walking, talking quirk. But then he pictured the scene at the port. The screaming civilians. The struggling heroes. The monstrous, unthinking destruction of a high-end Noma. His duty. His promise. I want to save people with a smile. He was torn between two impossible choices. Risk his soul, or let people die. He stood up, his legs still unsteady. He walked to the hidden panel, his movements slow, deliberate. He pressed his palm against it, and the silent door slid open, revealing the dark chamber within. The echo body lay on its bed, an image of serene perfection. It was a temptation made flesh. A beautiful, terrible lie. He looked from the perfect vessel back to his own reflection in the dark screen of the chamber's medical monitor. He saw the pale, haunted face of Izuku Midoriya. He saw the anchor. He made his choice. His face, once filled with fear and self-loathing, hardened into a mask of grim, sorrowful determination. He knew the price of what he was about to do. He knew the risk. But the calculus of a hero was simple and cruel. His soul was worth less than a single innocent life. I'm sorry, he whispered, to the vestiges, to All Might, but mostly to himself. He stepped into the chamber, took a deep, shuddering breath, and let the siren song of power claim him one more time. Void. Snap.